Happy Saturday morning from the Motor City Madmouth. This is No Limits. You are live on this beautiful Saturday. What do we call it? A spring day is what it is in most of the parts. If you're living in Florida and Las Vegas, you don't have spring. You got summer all year long. With that said, welcome to No Limits. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth. Pleased to be joined by Candy Ebling. And we have a special guest today, Joel Franco, the founder of Where Our Children Play. And I'm going to tell you, folks, if you're having an opportunity to watch this show live, you will get your time's worth. And hello, Brian Snow. How are you? Brian Snow and I are going to be working on a lot of projects coming up. So, Brian, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Meanwhile, this is a show I've been excited about. I know Chalane Miller wasn't able to make it today, but I guarantee you she's going to get peppered when I get done with that one, when we bring him back in 2 or 3 weeks. Chalane, feel better? You're going to need all the rest you can, because when you and I go at it, and Joel and Candy are the spectators, as the old legendary Keith Jackson of sports would say, "Oh, Nelly!" Am I a little loud for a Saturday morning? I don't know.
A little.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm just trying to be myself, So with that said, let me give you an overview of what this broadcast is all about. Okay, with Joel, I've had an opportunity, like many of my guests, to meet him on LinkedIn, which if you're looking for a professional source out there to come in contact with people, LinkedIn, in my opinion, is definitely truly in a class of its own. I would say the best. And then, of course, I've done all right with Twitter and Facebook, but LinkedIn is where it is at, especially when it comes to finding top-notch, first-class professionals. Joel just happens to fall into the LinkedIn category. We've been communicating for the last couple of weeks until we nailed down this time slot, and I'm so thrilled that we have him on. And not only that, I want to let everybody know that, Joel, you are anything but a one and done. They may not say that in Kentucky basketball, where you have one and dones, but you are anything but a one and done. I want to give everybody an overview of what you do. And in the coming weeks, as the relationship between Where Our Children Play and South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network comes in, that you'll have a lot of insightful opportunities pertaining to children. Let's face it, I think what really, to me, is important about talking about children is they are what we deal with at the circle of life, right? Pretty much. And exactly. I think why I want to incorporate children content on here, and I don't feel there's a better individual such Joel than you, of course, Chalane down the line. So with that said, okay, here, let's go to it. Joel, first of all, I know we've spoken about a series of programs for kids in sports, middle and high school. So let's break them down individually.
Yep.
Start with condition, physical condition. Go ahead and give me an overview on that.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Chalane regretfully wasn't able to join us, but like you said, she'll be with us next time. Yes, so the idea what we started was to create a program for children and parents where 2 things can happen. Number one, education, where we can help each family learn and understand what strength and conditioning, nutrition, mental health actually is. Because so many of those words get thrown around, especially in the Twitterverse or Instagram or social media in general, but so many times without context, and so many times you hear a lot of like cliche words, but kids don't really understand what that means, because strength and conditioning is a lot of things. And so Chalane and I have partnered up to create a program that is per child, per sport, on an individual basis, because all of us, every single person in the world, is an individual, and we all have our needs, we all have our deficiencies, if you will. Some people favor the left, some people favor the right, some people's backs a little turn, their ankle problems, they have a knee problem, whatever it is. So what we wanted to create was a way for each child to understand their body better, so then they can perform whatever the sport they're playing in a much higher level. Because once you understand why you have certain pains, you can work on fixing those certain pains and those certain deficiencies, if you will, and you can get better. You can get faster, you can get stronger. So what we do is, well, Chalane mostly in this particular case, she analyzes each child individually. She does an evaluation and assessment, and once that's done, she then asks them questions. They could vary from uh, what hurts, what doesn't hurt, when you play, all sorts of general questions, also to understand who the kid is.
Right.
Because once you understand who the kid is as a person, not just as a physical body, you also know how to talk to them, which unfortunately too many coaches tend not to do. They focus on one specific thing, but they don't focus on the whole person, which is kind of silly. You should focus on the whole person, because that's how you are able to get them to do what you need them to do. So the idea is, once you would create this program for them, like you have to do, push-ups or sit-ups or squats or whatever it is, then it evolves. And this is why we love this part. This is the part that we love the most, because then it becomes a relationship with the kid. Like, so if a child is blowing by the program in 2 seconds, it means their body is like taking off. We adjust it, we modify it, we make it harder or easier if they're having some injury or they needed to slow down. And it becomes a relationship with the child, and consequently with the parent, who are now understanding why their child is doing whatever they're doing, because they don't have to go to some gym where you pay $400, they give you, this is what you have to do, go do it, but there's no understanding of, why am I doing this? What is this actually going to do to me? And also you're not sure if even what you're doing is going to help me. Because how many coaches I have seen that I heard, well, when I trained for boxing, this is what we did to get stronger. Yeah, but you're coaching soccer. Boxing and soccer are not the same thing. It's not interchangeable. Every sport requires, and not only every sport, but every position in that particular sport requires different different work programs. A catcher is not the same thing as a pitcher. A wide receiver is not the same thing as a quarterback or a defensive lineman. So soccer is the same thing. A goalie is not the same thing as a striker or a midfielder. So, a center is not the same as a point guard. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked into when we give kids a training program.
Well,
and then sorry, go ahead.
And every kid is different and has different body chemistry and makeup and background and resources as well.
That is exactly the whole point of why we do this. We wanted to create this type of program that is all inclusive, but at the same time, it can be done anywhere.
All right. So
no money.
What I'm going to do now, Joel and Candy, I'm going to break down everything in a specific classification, okay? And I mean, totally, that way everybody can follow along with us as well as they can. So item number 1, okay, and then we'll talk about condition. The next will be nutrition and then mental health, okay? I want to break them down individually. So let's elaborate more about the physical condition, Joel, and then we'll proceed to the next one.
Okay, so basically what it looks like, once Chalane does the evaluation and she gets the questions answers for the kids, she prepares this, like, you're going to have to do, this is what you should be doing. And actually, I should back up for a quick second. The biggest question that we ask the children is, what is your schedule like? Because kids today are so overscheduled,
right,
that we don't want to become an extra thing that they have to do.
Right.
We want to be something that they want to do. So we specifically ask them, okay, what is your schedule from Monday to Sunday or Sunday to whatever? And once we know that, then we can start to, okay, so they tell us, okay, we have practice 4 days a week. All right. So to add the program for them to get better, it's going to be challenging. So we need to find ways. Okay, so for you, maybe instead of doing an hour, how about if we do 3 times a week, 30 minutes?
Right.
You know what I mean? Things like that, so that we can adjust to their schedule. Because one thing that is very important, no matter what part of the program they have to follow, is the kids need to feel like they can have ownership of it, that it's their choice to do it. That's one of the most important things for us, that we work with the children. We don't tell the children what to do. We work with them to help them. So once we create that specific to a child program, we tend to focus first on the fundamentals. So on movement, on the kinesiology type stuff, where we focus on them from the base. Because you can't just say, okay, go pitch 100 miles an hour and you're 12 years old, right? So we need to be able to build the movements, because a lot of kids today did not grow up playing in a park. They did not grow up doing the monkey bars. They haven't grown up just playing tag. So there's a lot of basic movements that kids don't know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had a doctor once told me, an Olympic doctor, as I'm working on the movie, that he challenged me and he told me, why don't you give these 10 basic exercises to your kids when you go to practice tonight for soccer? And I laughed at him, and he said, yes, I know. You think I'm funny. Go do it. Call me back tomorrow and tell me what you think. And there were basic stuff like run forward, run backwards, right side, run side to side, very, 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 very basics. I would say that 90% of my kids couldn't do it. They could not do it. They could not run side to side. They could not walk side to side. They couldn't walk backwards without turning. So those are the kind of things that's like, wait a second. He was right.
Right.
But of course, I'm not an MD, so I never thought about it that way. But as a coach, I started to realize, oh my God, I have to start to pay attention to those things, because that would cut down on injuries. Because if I'm paying attention to those things, that means I'm going to hopefully get more of my practice focus on that kind of stuff, which will cut down on injuries, which will cut down on kids being sad and depressed because they're not playing. And it will be a beautiful vicious cycle of positive. Okay. But so many kids don't know how to do those basic things. Some kids can't even lift their arms up straight. Wow. Like it's like bent a little bit. So you have like so many of these issues that we have to correct before we jump in to the actual sport specific, position specific activities. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's in steps. And of course, the beauty of it is because we're working directly with the kid, we get feedbacks immediately. So if a child says, I'm sorry, this is too hard for me.
Right.
Okay, let's dial it down just a minute. Let's catch you up. And then we keep pushing, or vice versa. If a kid says, oh, this is too easy, I can do it. Then we slowly increase it, because that's how, then you can build it. But again, it's kid specific. It's not a one size fits all.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it.
All right. So my question to you is, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding your point real well. So when we talk about physical condition in a very, very basic answer, are you saying that what you do is you start them off slow and then build them to a point where they're able to do it in steps so that they can ultimately get in the best physical conditions to do more things? Is that how you would basically keep it pretty simple for the average individual, that, while exactly. You know your thing real well, I have to make sure that we keep it simplified so these individuals understand this step in your process?
Exactly like that. It's a step-by-step process.
Okay, so now let's factor into step number 2, okay? And we're going to talk about nutrition. Mm-hmm. All right, what I'd like you to do is give a detailed answer, Joel, and then then call it a Cliff Notes version of the nutrition aspect of step number 2.
Well, nutrition is one of those most points that most people don't understand, including adults, because we are so conditioned by words like diet and fats and carbs, things like that.
Right.
But we don't actually understand what any of those actually do.
Right.
Because, the easiest thing for me to say, and again, Chalane is the expert on this, so she will knock your socks off next time. But the idea is to explain and show kids why they're not supposed to eat certain things before practice or before a game or even after a game. Because as we all know, especially with food, you start to touch of a lot of cultural things. But we always eat rice, or we always have tacos, or we always have pasta, or we always have, whatever it is. So you have to also educate the parents, because if an 18-year-old, I don't want to say that they can feed themselves, but it's much likely that they can kind of do, I don't want to say whatever they want, but it's easier for them to say, no, I don't want this, I'm going to eat that. A 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, much more difficult.
Right.
So what we have to work on is explaining the parents and the child why they have to have breakfast, why they should have a few smaller meals throughout the day, why they need to drink water instead of soda, that kind of things. But we can't go at them by saying, don't drink a Coke.
Right.
We have to go at them by, hey, did you drink water all day? No. You have a headache right now, right? Yes. You know what I mean? So it's like trying to show them cause and effect. So because kids understand that, adults understand that, but especially for kids, and especially young kids, they make a direct correlation much quicker, right? So if we tell a child, don't eat a donut, they're going to be, but I love donuts. What's wrong with donuts?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is, okay, have your donut maybe after the game or maybe after practice, not before, because before it makes you heavy, makes you sleepy,
Right.
You're going to be lethargic, that kind of stuff. Of course, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically the gist of it. Because if you can have the parent and the child work together, first of all, you create a much better atmosphere at home. You create communication with a parent and a child, which is never a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And they start working together, which would help solve so many issues in youth sports in general anyway, which is kind of like what we are trying to do by making better relationship with the parents and the child, and hopefully the coach eventually. Then you create this kind of environment where it's more positive and people want to change and they want to try new things. Because once you show a child, hey, don't eat pizza today. You love to eat pizza before a game. Okay, how about this? Today, eat fruit and yogurt, or whatever, peanut butter and some fruit, whatever, something. Well, see how you feel both ways, right? So one day you have pizza and one day you have the peanut butter. Well, the child is going to give us feedback, right? So if he had pizza or she had pizza, they're going to feel probably sleepy or heavy or maybe not feel so good. If they have like fruit and yogurts or something more like that, more water, they're probably going to feel a little more with more energy. Well, if they understand that, if they feel that, they see that, it's going to be easier for them to give up the pizza before a game type thing, or the heavy meal before, like 20 minutes before a game, that kind of thing. Instead of, don't do this, because nobody likes to be told not to do something. We don't. I mean, if somebody told me not to have ice cream, I would be very upset. I love ice cream. So it's, it's that kind of stuff. It's like, we want to educate, we want to help, we want to communicate. It has to become a communication. And if we don't work on that level, it's never going to work.
So the main thing when you talk about nutrition, and then Candy, why don't you let everybody know our information in a moment, okay? You're trying to really establish, a balancing act in terms of have your higher calorie meals after a game. That way it's kind of like you've extended that energy, right? So that you don't really feel the brunt of it. But then you have the balancing act between, a lot of the healthier stuff one day and the other cravings, if I can put it loosely, another day. So I look at it like a little balancing act when you look at nutrition between how they're connected, and that's where the relationship and the kid, as well as you people, as advisors, comes into play, and you're able to put together a multifaceted program with the 3 participants involved. Am I reading that correctly?
It is. It has to be, because eventually, like anything, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We're not going to change our habits in 2 minutes.
Right.
So we're going to build on it. And our goal is not to shame anybody. It's not to make you feel bad. The idea is exactly that, to teach you what you're doing, how you're doing it. And that's why when we do our assessment, we ask so many questions to the child, because we need to understand what their habits are. We need to understand what their schedule is.
Right.
Because if not, we can't help them properly if we don't understand that relationship. Like, what time do they get up? What time do they go to bed? Do they eat before practice, or do they have to wait until after the practice or after the game, whatever it is? Because so many children today get up at 5 a.m. and they don't go to bed until like 11. And they don't often have a chance to have a few meals during the day, because they're in school, and you have like a 15-minute lunch recess. So you don't want to eat during that. You want to go out and play. You want to be outside for a few minutes, because your brain is about to explode, because you're exhausted, because you just a lot of information for those 3-4 periods before you have lunch. So there's a lot of these things that we need to understand, so that we can help them more, so that we can slowly, bring some carrots one day, maybe bring a banana, maybe bring a thing of milk, whatever it is. So then slowly they start to get into these habits of good stuff. And then over time, they won't even realize what they're doing. And now they have habit formed for the rest of their lives, even if when they stop playing whatever the sport they're playing. And that's what really is the goal, right? To educate, get them better, good habit. And, and like you said, in moderation. If one day they want a donut, have a donut. Right. Chalane will kill me for saying that, but that's the idea. Everything in moderation.
Let's face it. There's obesity is such a huge problem in the United States, and it starts with the kids. I mean, yes, there's many adults that are obese too, but it's the habits that you start as a young and as a youth that can carry you forward. So education, I agree, is key.
All right. So with that said, Candy, why don't you let everybody know how they can find this broadcast and the good stuff? And then once you've done that, we're going to put Joel on the spot, and we're going to talk about some mental health. How's that sound, Joel?
Sounds fantastic.
All right. Go ahead, Can.
So you are listening to our show on No Limits, which is on the South Florida YouTube channel. We do broadcast live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Did I miss one? I don't know. I don't remember. You can always, if you're not a visual person and you're an audio person, you can always listen to our broadcast on iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. If you want to be on one of our shows, you can send us questions, comments, ideas at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. You can always call Scott if you want to advertise or sponsor a show, 954-304-4941, or email us. But that red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, if you see it, that means you're not a subscriber yet. Hit it, like it, share it with all your friends. We're trying to strive for 1,000 subscribers. Comment on the broadcast. Tell us that you're here and listening to us. We love to hear from you. We appreciate Brian and George both commenting so far. So keep listening, and we're going to dive into some more good stuff.
Well done, Candy. All right. Now that Joel had a chance to take a 2-second breather before we bring it back, okay. Everybody's favorite one, I think, mental health. Boy, you could probably do a show on mental health, but we won't go do a show on it, but we will talk about it on future episodes. But I want you to pretty much give us a basic overview where mental health factors into all of this.
Yes, well, that's the number 1, 2, and 3. Because without our brains, we're not doing anything. And sadly, too many coaches don't seem to understand that training the mind is just as important as training the body. because the body is your body. You're going to be able to do whatever it is that you can do to your abilities, and sometimes more if you train properly. But, and it's a huge but, if the mental part is not there, not happening. And that's something that we also seem to misunderstand in society today. Like, it's almost like taboo. We can't talk about it. We can talk about broken elbows, broken knees,
Right.
Tommy John surgery, all sorts of things. But if somebody breaks down mentally, we freak out, panic. Oh, that kid is weak. Oh, that kid stinks. Oh, we need to cut him or her. And that's a ginormous disservice. And as bad as it is with boys, and it's horrible the way parents are with boys, the way parents are with girls, it's disgusting. I mean, it's beyond bad. Because, and I coach girls and boys. Lately, I've been coaching girls more. And what I see happening with girls is just mind-numbing. Absolutely mind-numbing. And we can't do that. We need to treat our children properly. First of all, we need to treat them as they are, kids. They're not adults. They're not a 30-year-old version of Michael Jordan. I mean, a 12-year-old version of Michael Jordan. They're not. They won't be. They will never be. They may be the best version of Mickey or Tommy or Jenny or whoever. But they will not be Michael Jordan because they're not Michael Jordan. They're themselves. So we need to stop that. They're doing sports, but they're doing sports at their age. So let's stop trying to make them Kobe Bryant. They're not. Kobe Bryant was not Kobe Bryant at 10 years old. Right? So it doesn't work that way. John Small said when we interviewed him for the movie, he said, you get to a point where the sport chooses you. And that is so true. But so many of these kids are forced into something because of their parents play that sport, because maybe the parents, it's the only sport they know, because maybe that's a way for the kid to make money. I don't know what the reasons are. But if you are 7 foot tall, chances are that you're not going to play soccer. Not because you're bad at it, but there's not that many 7-footer that play soccer, right? Just like if you're 4'10", probably you're not going to be a center in the NBA. So, right. But all of these things create mental blocks on children along the way, because now you're putting so much pressure on these kids between the overscheduling, the over-practicing, the constant. I mean, I know people who have like their kids play 6-7 games a weekend. That's insane. So now you create kids who have panic attacks. Now you create kids who do overeat, because some of us stress eat. So now you have, and you see again, because you can't take any of these. The beauty of what we're trying to do is that all of these are together, they're combined. You can't take one without the other.
All right.
So if you have a child that is eating like crazy, and we then ask them questions and we find that, it's because of this, and this. It's not the food the problem, is this part the problem.
All right.
So now you're starting to see where to attack and how to go around it. Because I have girls who tell me all the time, like, well, coach, we have to take my brother to practice. So we have to take my brother to a game, so I won't be able to come to the game or to the practice. Wait, your practice doesn't count, but your brother's does? So, and now, even though we didn't say you can't play that sport to a girl, but we are making them feel like they can't play that sport. And so they give up and they stop playing, which is why so many more girls stop playing sports at a young age in comparison to boys. But what are we actually telling these girls? That is going to hurt them, not just for sports, long term. Now you're telling them they're secondary. Now you're telling them they don't matter. Now you're telling them that whatever they want to do doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So now you're extending the problem from just whatever the sporting activity, to the rest of their lives. I mean, we do very similar things to boys the opposite way. It's like, well, you're not tough enough. But what does that mean? You're not tough enough. It means nothing. There's actually no substance to that statement. So you're playing injured. So we're forcing boys to play hurt. Why? Because you're not tough enough. So you have a 10-year-old who blows their knee or their shoulders or whatever it is, and now they can't play ever again.
Right.
And you accomplish what exactly? I mean, we do that to adults too. Like you have adults where their legs, their limbs are barely moving, and we force them to play. And then we say, well, he wasn't tough enough. He needs to toughen up. He needs to do it for the team. Okay. So they have to jeopardize their lives for 2 games, 1 game. Are we kidding? So that's the kind of stuff we want to focus on, is how to help children deal with that kind of stuff, but most importantly, be able to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Because so often, as soon as you use the word mental, psychology,
right,
it becomes taboo. Like we can't talk. It's like, no, it's woke, or it's silly. It's who cares? Kids just they're just too weak. Well, again, what are we telling our kids by saying stuff like that?
Right.
Because that's what happens. They feel weak. They feel like they don't matter. And what happens when you feel that dark? Suicide rates go up. Because now, and what happens when you get hurt and you cannot play anymore? And all of your life up to that point, you were told you are a basketball player, you are a football player. And if you don't play football, you're nothing. But what happens when they have to stop? Now, all of a sudden, these kids don't know who they are because everything was wrapped up into that one thing. And now they get depressed and they do poorly in school and they go into this slippery slope. And too many times we hear of children committing suicide by age 14. So our goal is to be able to talk to these kids, to be able to open them up, to teach them that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, especially in the teenage years when hormones are going crazy. Girls' bodies are changing even more than boys' bodies are changing in some ways. And now you have this complete crazy thing in their heads that teenage kids are,
right,
they're all over the place because they're learning about their body. They're figuring themselves out. And if we add all of these other pressure, we're going to make them explode. And we can't do that.
So Joel, what I want you to do, and I have a couple of great one-liners I'm going to throw your way, okay? Give me the Cliff Notes version. Oh, you're going to love these ones. I guarantee you that, okay? So give me, I've been thinking about it while you're very candid, and I got news for you. The longer I keep quiet, the more ideas come. You're going to find out as time goes on. But so give me the Cliff Notes version again of mental health, maybe in a couple sentences about, and then I'm going to follow up some pretty interesting stuff.
We need to remove the taboo from the conversation.
Okay.
It has to be open conversation between parent, coach, and obviously, most importantly, the child.
Okay. Well, now you're ready for a couple one-liners. You talk about 7 foot tall people. Number one, okay, you're not going to find a 7 foot tall guy being a jockey on a horse. Okay. If you do, they're going to hit the dirt. Number two, you're not going to find them in a NASCAR because you want to talk about a can of sardines. Stick a guy in there 7 foot tall. I was in one actually in Homestead, Miami. I'm not 7 foot, but boy, those windows are not like Canada. They're not far and wide. You got to really work it. Half the work is getting in those things. I kid around with Canada, but if you've ever gotten into a NASCAR stock car, it's not easy to do it. And number three, if you bother to go into an Indy car, 7 feet people can get in there. Then you got a 7 foot person who's going to look like a giraffe riding around the track at 200 miles an hour. So with that, I knew you'd get a kick out of them. And now the only place I can imagine a 4 foot tall guy would be on a jockey in horse racing. And many of your great jockeys, I don't know whether, they come from all over the world here. Stick a guy on a horse, and let me tell you, that's a pretty good job if you can get it. Short people have certain places that they belong in, and when you're on a jockey on a horse, that's one of them. But yeah, I'd like to see a NASCAR guy 7 foot tall get in those thingamajobbers. I'm telling you. And as I mentioned before, you stuck a 7 foot tall guy on there, although they have those stirrups, right? You have to keep your legs in those. If you didn't, then I guarantee your foot would be on top of dirt, and all of a sudden, that's another story for another day. I had to get that out there. Glad I did. And when you leave me someplace, you never know where the heck is going on. So now let's take this conversation to another level. I want to get Candy more and more involved, but there's a lot of key points I want to make sure we get to. So, we'll go a little bit more rapid fire on some of this stuff, okay? But the first parts of things, you had to get into tremendous detail because they were that important. So you talk about the fact, Joel, that you work with child and kids, and most of them are not educated. Just give me a basic reason of why this is such a case.
I think a lot of it has to do with today's society. Some of it has to do with culture, where they're from, where they grew up, and not in a negative way, but it does make a difference. Every culture has different standards, if you will, of what is or isn't accepted. And we need to break through some of those barriers. And again, our goal is not to judge, our goal is to teach, educate. Because like I said, every culture has their pluses and every culture has their minuses. And that's the beauty of the world, that we get to learn from a variety of different people from everywhere. At the same time, the mental part seems to be a pretty common problem across cultures. And that's something that we need to learn how to navigate, to help, because we want to help. And the minute that you educate people and you teach them something, they will be able to use that forever. If you judge them and you criticize them, you lost them. And that's not what we want to do at all. We want to be able to help them. And sometimes you have to be very patient. You can't just bang at something. You have to be carefully walking through so they can understand, so they can hear you. Because so many things that we do today, which I do think is probably one of the biggest problems we have in today's society, is that we don't listen to each other.
Right.
So if we don't listen to each other, what we do is meaningless. So we have to be able to find a way to communicate with people from different parts of the world and find a common understanding. So then we can actually make progress.
Okay. All right. So
Joel, do you think part of it is that we have become a society where we always think that our kids have to have it better off than we did, and therefore we're scheduling everything, and we have to work like both parents. In most cases now, both parents work. Whereas the society when I was growing up, my mom was there home raising, us children while my dad went out. And granted, he had 3 jobs, so don't get me wrong, he worked very hard, but at least there was someone there to help educate us and talk to us about some of those things. Whereas now you hear there are you have to have 2-income homes to afford lifestyles that we've, drummed up now that we have to have it better than they did before.
Good question.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an issue, but I don't think it's the main issue. But that's the thing, right? The way society works is different for all of us, and that's where I think we stop listening to each other to one another, because your upbringing is different than my upbringing, but I'm sure that if we talk for more than 2 minutes, we're going to find a lot of similarities, because that's what we all are. We have our differences, where we grew up, where we didn't, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. You're a parent and you have a child, you love your child, you want the best for them. And that goes way beyond political favorites or where you're from or whatever it is. And we need to stop trying to see everything under that mentality that we do today. Like so many times you have a discussion with people about, eating fruit or something, and something so benign as that. And yet people make it a political conversation. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. It has nothing to do. We all are humans.
Right.
If we all go out and eat 10 donuts every day, we're all going to die at some point of heart attack,
Right.
regardless of politics, right?
Right.
So it becomes something that we can't even talk about, something that should be obvious, like children. I mean, children is not political, or shouldn't be.
Right.
And that goes around the planet. That's the one thing that I have realized making the movie, the documentary on youth sports, is that it's like, oh my God, we are all the same. We all have the same concerns. Like, I want my kids to play soccer. I want my kids to play on the travel baseball team, like you said. But I didn't have that. I want my kids to have that. But where we fail is not necessarily that. It's the fact that then we don't ask our children, do they want to play baseball?
Right.
Do they want to play football? Or do they want to play football, baseball, soccer, tennis at that level?
Mm-hmm.
We forget that step. And that's where we get lost, because all of a sudden you're spending all of this money. And because you spend all of this money, you're putting so much pressure on the children, because the children know that you're spending a lot of money. The children know you're working 3 jobs. The children know that you have to take off work to take them to wherever they have to go. So we have to be able to, and that's where one of our biggest things is to create a better atmosphere at home,
Right.
where there is communication, where kids and parents are talking to each other, not at each other, but to each other.
Right.
And they start listening. Oh, Tommy doesn't want to play baseball. He wants to play football.
Right.
Well, okay. And how many times, like, I give this example all the time, and I get people stumped when they yell at me and they say that I'm crazy. And I said, okay, think about it in reverse. You know, you guys, for example, like, I'm sure you had jobs that you hated growing up. You may have had a job that you hated last week, you know, whatever it is. And you decide, you know what? I don't like this job. I want to change it. Or, you know what? I'm not getting paid enough here. I want a job that pays me a little bit more. Does anybody criticize you for that? Does anybody says that you're wrong? Does anybody judge you? No, right? You make your choice because it's better for you.
Mm-hmm.
You do it, you change the job, and hopefully you're happy in your new position. Well, how's that any different for a kid? Well, I used to love soccer. Now I like basketball.
Right.
Does that make you a bad kid because you don't like soccer anymore? No, you just want to play basketball now.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that? But as parents, we invested so much in one thing, we don't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ridiculous. We have to give the children the ability to change and make their lives. It's their lives at the end of the day. We can't live it for them.
Right.
We can give them the tools, but we can't make it for them.
So let me segue to this. And I'm only going to make a mention of the names, but I want to focus on this particular point. Okay. We know that, you know, the ball kids playing basketball, their father is heavily influential. And we know the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, are to me, are the gold standard for tennis. I'm only mentioning it, but the question that I had that we talked about is something that you mentioned that really intrigued me, was instead of told to do it, explain to do. So what I want you to do is give the audience a basic answer, and I'll repeat it again. Instead of told to do it, explain to do. There's a difference in how you convey that particular message.
It goes for all of us. If we understand why we're doing something, we're going to do it, or not, but it's going to be our choice.
Right.
Because we understand it, we processed it, and we go, okay, maybe I'll give it a try.
Right.
When you're told to do something, you go into defense mode.
Right.
And when we go in defense mode, you tend to block things. You block information. You don't like to be told you're wrong. None of us do, let alone a kid who's still processing how to work those emotions. So I always try to think, how am I reacting as an adult? And then I try to translate it to how would a kid react? Because if it bothers me, of course it's going to bother the kid. Right? Because, if I tell you, I don't like your hat, it's horrible, remove it, you're going to look at me and say, why? It's beautiful. I love my hat, right? But if I tell you that, you know what, because, say they were filming something, for example, right? And I tell you, hey, that green is messing up because we're shooting next to trees, and the green of the hat is messing up with the green of the trees, and now it's blending in. So wear a red hat instead. Now you're going to be, oh, okay, I totally understand that. Let me remove my hat so that we can get a better shot.
Right.
See the difference? So it's that kind of stuff that we need to be able to tell a child, hey, if you do this, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, how I often refer to something like that. It's a tool that's commonly used in sales, called the velvet hammer. Is really what it is. You ever heard the term velvet hammer? You ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Well, now you have. One of my old bosses told me about it. Now I understand the psychology of it, which is why what you're saying in terms of told to do versus explained to do falls into that mode. All right. So the next point here is educate people, understand versus telling. Why don't you give me your overview on that?
Well, that's basically the follow-up to what we just said. It's once you understand what you're doing, you learned it and you won't forget it. And once you don't forget it, now you are, I guess, by definition, educated. Right. So it becomes something that, again, it becomes a cycle, because the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And one of the most dangerous things that we have in today's world, not just in the US, everywhere, is the lack of curiosity.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's terrible, because it limits us. It's almost like we're afraid of learning. And it's like, why? The beauty of it is that we do learn. And some you're going to go like, nah, I don't like that. Some you're going to say, yes, love that. Right. But we got to learn, and we got to be curious. We're humans. Human beings are curious by nature. So why are we forcing ourselves not to learn?
Right.
So our goal is to be able to do that very thing, to create kids and parents who are curious, who are becoming more curious, who now, because once they learn one thing, they're going to hopefully start to connect the dots to something else.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, you're starting to build the line goes up, and now they're figuring, that's why I so, and that's the beauty of it. There's nothing better to me than learning.
Yeah. And you know what? Let me say this again, because I think I'm really intrigued by everything you've talked about. I think it's a heck of an opportunity to get you out there in a message. Understand versus telling. Okay. To me, it's about being a sponge, because when you understand something, then you can tell stories. And that's where a lot of this stuff really ties in. So that's why I'm glad we touched on it briefly. Now, you alluded to this earlier, Joel, and now I want to really bring this into play. A couple more topics. And what I'm going to do, folks, is after I cover a couple of things, Candy's going to take over, and then she's going to have the opportunity to ask anything she wants. I just want to stay on point so we're able to go here. So, with that said, okay, how much psychology factors into all of this? I know you touched on it, Joel, briefly, but now you have an opportunity to put the P word into play and explain to our viewers, both not only watching us, but as well as listening to us, whether it's on the road or not, because this is the psychology I do believe plays a huge role. But tell me what you've got. The floor's yours on this one.
Well, psychology is like a lot of other things, right? We all are different. So as coaches and parents, and especially coaches, because you deal with the kids on a daily basis, is to understand them. You have to be willing to put the work in to understand who that child is. Because no two child are the same, just like no two adults are the same. Nobody is the same.
Right.
So it starts there. So you have to understand where these people are coming from. And if you can figure that out, you will understand their psychology, and you will understand how to talk to them. Some kids like it when you not yell at them, but some kids like it when you're a little more forceful with them. Some kids like it when you just talk like this and say, hey, Timmy, next time, take the ball to the hoop, lay up. Okay. And Timmy will do that. Some kids prefer you not saying anything until after. So there's an umpteenth, ways the kids like or don't like something. And you have to find it, because if you don't find it, you're going to lose some of those kids. But you're not going to just lose them for your team. You're going to lose them, period.
Right. called Tune You Out, is what it's called, Tune You Out 101. And if I'm understanding you correctly, psychology plays an enormous role into everything you're doing. Because I can tell you, whether you're a kid or an athlete, if the message isn't conveyed in a proper way, they'll tune you out. And that's where psychology and Freud really comes into play. And
it's even more than that, because you really think about it. Like, one of the things I learned is, for example, which really shocked me when I learned it, if I yell at you from the sidelines and I'm screaming at you at the top of my lungs, all the most horrible things possible, right? Or if I do the very same thing with the same voice, tone, everything, but I'm screaming that I love you instead. Our brain does not distinguish the two.
Right.
So we immediately go into defense mode, flight or fancy, whatever the term is, right? Mm-hmm. So I could tell you that I love you, or I could tell you that I hate you, and your brain won't distinguish it because you're screaming at me. So now what you're doing is you're going like this as a child. I mean, as an adult too, but as a child especially, you're like, what? Oh my God, coach is mad. Coach is mad. What did I do? What did I do? Right? Even if you told them they were wonderful.
Right.
So we have to understand how that works.
Right.
Because then when you communicate with someone, you're going to do something different.
Right.
So, once I learned that, for example, I started to teach my kids that when I call their name, they can look at me. It's not negative. They're looking at me and I'm going like this or whatever, or go over there. But I'm signaling.
Right.
I'm not screaming.
Right.
You see what I mean? And that goes into the psyche of a child, because now when they hear me say their name, they don't go like this, because they're already used to that. That's not what I need. I need something else. Right. You know what I mean? Because I say this, for example, one of the funniest mistakes I've ever made as a coach was there was one player that took off. It was one-on-one, and there was another player next to her, and she was offside. So I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Don't pass her the ball." Now, in my mind, I'm saying, don't pass her the ball because she's offside. In her mind, she's saying, don't pass her the ball because it's her. You see what I mean? As soon as I said that, I go, oh no, what did I just do? Right? Because it clicked for me, what did I actually say? So, of course, I caught myself at halftime, which was soon after. The only thing I talked about in the halftime conversation was, I apologize. I said, I am so sorry. That is not what I meant. Right. And I explained what I actually meant. But you see, if I didn't catch myself, now that player is thinking in her head, I cannot pass the ball to my teammate. Right. Because coach doesn't want me to. Right. They didn't think she's offside, so don't give her the ball. She think coach doesn't want me to play, so she must suck, and that player is thinking, why does coach hate me? Right. Just for completely something that I had no intentions of doing. Right. Now, thinking back, it's kind of funny. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And that's what we have to be able to do, because as coaches, first of all, we have to accept that we make mistakes and we screw up, which too many of us don't do. And we have to, because we're not infallible. We make mistakes all the time.
Okay, so then I want to follow up with this thing here, okay? You really struck a chord here with me on this, okay? And just give me a basic answer on this, because I know where I'm going to go with it, okay?
Go.
Are kids young enough to understand the word psychology in terms of relating, or does it take a while to understand what psychology is really all about, if you get what I'm saying? And then the follow-up question to that will be, give me the general age of your kids in terms of your type of clientele. So start with the first part and then the second.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
But obviously you have to talk to them at age level. So you're not going to talk like this to a 9-year-old.
Right.
you're going to have to speak to them as they would understand as 9-year-olds. So whatever example you're going to have to use, it has to match their age.
Right.
And again, that goes back to what we talked earlier, that we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to coaching.
Right. Okay.
Just like parenting, of course, but coaching in particular, because we're talking sports. You cannot do that. Each child is different. So you have to approach it at their age level. Not talking to them as they're idiots. Let's be clear.
Right.
Age appropriate does not mean talking to them like they're idiots, because too many coaches talk with kids like they're idiots. They're not idiots at all. They're smarter than us. Kids see things that we don't, just like adult players see things on the field, on the court, on the ice, wherever, that we don't see as coaches, because they're the ones doing it. Okay. We are not doing it. Like, I've had players come to me and tell me, hey, coach, if I switch like this, I will be better because I'm going against blah, blah, blah. Now, as a coach, you have two options. You either listen to your player, or you say, no, I'm the boss. Do what I say.
Right.
I always choose to listen to my players 95% of the time.
Right.
Sometimes I'd say, no, you know what? Let's try this first and then this way. But once you do that, you see, to me, again, it goes back to showing them versus telling them. So if you tell someone, talk to me, they come and talk to you, you listened, you give them an answer, and they go, oh, coach really listened to me. Now I get it, right? But if you tell somebody, come talk to me, I'm here for you, they come talk to you, you ignore them,
right?
Coach is full of it. And that goes, and that they understand. So it's like, they may not understand words like psychology and things like that, but they do understand the psychology of it and what it does to them.
Okay, so then if I'm hearing you correctly, that they are very conscious or cognizant of psychology is what you're telling me. And then the follow-up to that is, give me a age in terms of the type of kids that you're actually going ahead. And then my last question until Candy takes over is, I'm going to lump 3 points. Okay, so give me the general age for which you guys work with.
At the moment, we're working with kids 10 and up.
Okay.
So we're working from 10 to high school at the moment. This is what we have. Eventually, we'd like to maybe go a little bit younger, but probably 10 will be the cutoff. Like, let's start from 10 up, right? Because a lot of times, I mean, there's no real point for 7-8-year-old to do physical training. Just go out and play. Go out and play tag. Go out and do monkey bars. Go out and just bump into each other and fall on the ground and get up again. You know what I mean? Just go and have fun. Okay. There's no reason for a 6-year-old to be doing like 50 push-ups in a day. I mean, it's ridiculous. Right. No, just go and play. So usually we try to start around 10, 11. And then, of course, then we go up.
All right. I'll never forget a situation a long time ago in 1987, when I was working in North Carolina, and I did 2 public speeches. One was to a church group, and it was about the negative effects of drug abuse and alcohol and all that. They received the message better. Or when I went to a local community center, I had to change my whole approach. I said, you know what, this, isn't working out. So what I did is I didn't rip up my outline. I just knew, all right, just talk to these kids and hope they register. So I can appreciate where you're coming from. And hey, listen, they gained as much out of it as the other. And they were both unique and different experiences. I enjoyed each of them. Now, I'm going to lump this situation together. Afterwards, Candy takes over. I'm sure she'll have some Candy questions that she wants. But when we talk about your program, Joel, overall, you talk about the fact that it's specific to sport with a child. Number 2 child gets the same program, and then you individualize it for each child, and they have different needs. So I want you to take each and every point that I made and give me an overall overview of what, once again, I'll repeat them again: specific to sport child, obviously the number 2 child gets the same program, individualize it, because each child has different needs. So just put it all together, and the floor is yours. And then after you've answered that question, Candy, I'm sure we'll have a bunch of great questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. We just, like I said earlier, we assess the child, we find their needs, and once we find their needs, we build something that matches what they need. So whether it's they need to build their core, or whether they need to get stronger ankles, or their knees are very wobbly, so we need to strengthen the areas around it. Whatever it is. So that's the physical part. The nutrition part is, of course, goes back to what we said. It's like, okay, you need to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe some snacks in between. But again, trying to fit their schedule so that it doesn't become overwhelming for them, that they just get to a point they don't want to do it. And the mental part is constant. It's nonstop. It's talking to them. It's reaching out to them. It's, hey, something is wrong. Tell me what is going on. Because as we all know, kids tend to talk more sometimes to coaches or teachers than they do their parents. So we have to be ready for that. We have to be available for that. And that's because if we do that, we're working on their mental part without working on their mental part. You see what I mean? So they don't feel like you're being analyzed. They feel like they're being heard. And once they're heard, again, it's a cycle and it's all connected. You can't take one without the other. So if this doesn't work, you're not going to want to work out. So you have to work on everything. So that's how we do it.
Okay. All right, Candy, take over.
So Joel, tell us a little bit about your background that qualifies you to do something like this.
Yes. Well, I was born and raised in Italy. That doesn't particularly qualify me, but that's where I'm from. But for me, it's been a constant learning as a teacher, my main job is filmmaking. My first love, I should say, is filmmaking. And that's why we're doing a documentary on this. But as a coach, when I started, I didn't want to start. I didn't want to do it because I just wanted to enjoy my kids' play. And when my son forced me to, because he kept saying, please, 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 coach me, coach me, coach me, coach me. I was like, okay. So I had to come up with a way, because I heard so many horror stories of parents coaching their child. So I had to come up with ways to not fall into that trap. And so I started to work out stuff like, okay, when we're in the car, we're not going to talk about it. When I'm on the field, I'm coach. When I'm anywhere else, obviously I'm daddy. But on the field is coach. So I'm not coming at you as your dad. I'm coming at you as your coach. Luckily, my son got that completely from the beginning. Like, never was a problem. He even called me coach when we were on the field. But then I started to put the pieces together. I was like, wait a second. If I'm like this with him, and then I started to look at my players and how their parents are with the kids. And I was starting to scratch my head because I'm like, oh my God, what are they doing? Right? Yelling, screaming, cussing them out, telling them they sucked. And I'm like, they're 7. Know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole thing about the car was like, I don't want to talk about it unless you want to talk about it. And I was like, as strict as it gets. The second we get into the car, we're not talking about what just happened. You need a minute, because what I was hoping was to work out a way for them to digest, calm down, whether it was positive or negative, and then talk about it. Now we got to a point where it's my kids who ask me, hey, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? But now it comes from a different place. They're asking me. So over time as a coach, I started to put together I started to see these things happening. And then I started to talk to other coaches and see how they do things. And a lot of coaches don't want to talk about what they do because, God forbid, they're like the geniuses of the geniuses. And that was confusing to me. But then I started to talk to coaches abroad. And they were more than happy to talk. I was like, that's interesting. Why are the coaches over there more interested than to talk about stuff to you than coaches over here? So, then you start to really wanting to, then you see girls getting hurt more than boys. And you want, okay, why does that happen? And then you find out that coaches don't study, they don't learn. And it's like, well, why? So it's like, I want to learn. And that's why I started to make the movie. Because for me, it was like, if I'm feeling this way, I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Right.
Or at least I hope I'm not the only one. And obviously I'm not, because I got a chance to talk to so many wonderful people who feel the same way I do. And hopefully we can show that to the world.
So tell us a little bit about the documentary, like how long, obviously you just told us what your inspiration was to make the documentary.
Yeah.
How long has this been, how long has it taken you? And I'm not judging, because obviously to do a good job, like sometimes it takes a while to do the job the way you want it to be done. And then when do you think it'll be released?
Yes. So COVID slowed us down a bit, as many things. But at the same time, it helped us tremendously. So I'll always have this love-hate relationship with COVID because it was a disaster, obviously. But it helped us because it allowed me time to focus and to really find out what we needed. I was always be grateful, relatively speaking, to have had those 1.5 to 2 years of, unfortunately, we were all in a pause. We couldn't do much. So we kind of had to pause. But at the same time, I was able to talk to a lot of people. So I got to learn. I got to reach out. I got to network. I got to communicate. And then I did a lot of things like we're doing right now. And then you realize, oh my God, I actually have a lot of footage that I didn't think I had. Right. So it's been a few years in the making. And now, hopefully, if all goes well, we should potentially be done by summertime. Now we're editing. My goal is to have the movie somewhere in the 80-minute range. I don't like documentaries. They're too long. I don't like them. An hour to me is too short, but over an hour and a half is too much information. And people tend not to, you get bored after a while. It's just too much. So I'm hoping to be in and around, let's say 90 minutes or less. I just can't wait. I'm excited. Like I said, we're editing right now. We're starting to structure it, put all the pieces where they hopefully go, and then we go from there.
Give us some like sneak peek, or like who is in it, or what can we expect from it?
Well, hopefully the idea is that everybody's going to get something different from it. And I'm not trying to be wishy-washy with that, but I really hope so. Because we are making the movies about kids and bringing the focus of sports back on the kids, of youth sports back on the kids. So hopefully, you will hear a lot of stuff from kids. You will also hear some things from adults. We were lucky enough to interview John Smoltz and Tom Glavine. We were able to interview more common folk, which to me is even more important, because what we were hoping to do is to be able to show parents around the world that there are other parents around the world who feel just like them. When you hear with someone as amazing as John Smoltz or Tom Glavine Hall of Fame, how can you beat that, right? And their interviews were spectacular. They were amazing. And that kind of shows the potential and the possibility of what a child could get to. And some people may find that the most important part, but some people may find that what the dad or the mom in the movie, who just have to work 2 jobs like you and me, they talk about. You see, so I'm hoping that people can take from different parts and connect to different ways. Because we're talking about the whole system. We're not talking about one thing in particular. It's not just money. It's not just a crazy coach or a crazy parent. It's the whole system. The whole system is messed up, not just one thing. We can't just fix one thing and hope the rest goes into place.
Awesome. So you talk about coaching and doing individual coaching as well. So we'll transition a little bit from the documentary. Where do you do this coaching, or how do you do the coaching, or how does a parent that wants their kid to be coached, what do they do?
You hope for the best. I think too many parents trust the wrong people, and they don't trust themselves. if you candy tell, oh, you need to go to Scott because Scott is the greatest coach in the planet. And I go to Scott and I'm like, that doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. Well, but Candy said Scott is the best, so Scott has to be the best. Well, yes, that may be the case, but it may not also be the case. And sometimes parents, one of the parents in the movie actually said this, we abdicate our responsibility as parents because we trust people. Well, if Scott is the best coach, then my daughter has to play with Scott. Well, what if Scott is not a perfect coach for my kids? Right? Because my kids may not like Scott's style. It happens.
Yep.
So, and it doesn't make Scott's bad or doesn't make my kids bad. It just no connection. Okay. But that's where it becomes a hard thing for parents because there is a fear of missing out. So if I don't go with Scott, oh my God, my kid will never play baseball. Well, not true. But that is the biggest issue that I find with parents. They're scared. Parents, because a lot of parents also don't know. There's so many voices coming at you. There's so many things online that pop up, and you're always afraid, oh my God, my kids are not doing that, so maybe they need to do that, and they're not learning. It's like, calm down, be smart, see if first of all, the kid has to like that coach. Number one. Nothing else matters, because if the kid hates that coach, the kid could be the greatest coach on the planet, and if that kid doesn't connect with that person, never going to happen. So you have to be careful. Just listen to your kid and what the kid needs, not you.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that because in corporate America, they say that you don't leave a job, you don't leave the company because of the company. You leave the job because of the manager you have. So it's kind of the same premise, if you don't mix with that coach, you're not gonna, the same with corporate America. If you don't like your manager, you're not gonna produce or do whatever. So it's interesting how that all ties in. And like you said, it starts from young.
It could not have said it any better. It's exactly like that. If we don't connect, at the end of the day, we're human beings and we need to connect. We need to know someone is going to care. Somebody's going to listen. Someone is going to really cares about me. Yeah. Because as a kid, let alone as an adult, but at least as an adult, you at least say, okay, this place sucks, but I'm making $1 million.
Right.
Well, a kid doesn't make $1 million. So you don't even have that to fall back on. So it's difficult. You have to look at how many players had a coach and the player was horrible, and they go to another coach and all of a sudden become a Hall of Famer. Oh, yeah. It's how you connect. It's just, if you don't connect, not going to happen.
There is one thing I want to add to this, which is interesting. My father, I want to talk about my dad because of the way things are going. I had an opportunity to play baseball with him he coached me in baseball for 5 years, coached me in basketball for 1, and then I took a year off and coached with him along with other people. And I'll tell you one thing, to me, when it came to youth sports, my dad is numero uno, number one. He is. And I'm not being biased, okay, because he's my dad. And I'll tell you why. Number one, when it comes to getting off the slow starts, I'm really good at it, okay? And I'm not afraid to admit that here on a national platform. But my first 2 years of Little League were absolutely god-awful, okay? But I was on the team. I got whatever innings I had to get on. Year number 3, though, it was a different story. We had a couple of catchers that didn't show up. Okay, my dad tried as hard as he could to put me in every position. I was bad at every one of them. Never got a chance to pitch. But year number 3, 2 starting catchers don't show up. Okay. And what happens? I raised my hand so loud, it's a wonder I didn't even, it was a wonder that my shoulder wasn't disconnected. You get the idea. Of course, if you're listening, you won't, but visualize it anyways. My dad says, yeah, okay, go behind the plate. At this point, the poor guy's exhausted. Where do I stick this hyper kid of mine? Just have to find the right spot to put him somewhere. So you know what ended up happening? Not only did I do well at the catching position, okay, I loved the position because I was fully into the game. I was out there giving umpires a hard time. I was trash talking the hitter. I was doing a lot of mound visits to disrupt the flow to get my pitcher and my team every opportunity to do well. And then during innings, I was warming up my other pitchers as well. So you talk about the most hyper individual back then. And ironically, that particular year, unfortunately, my grandpa died because of lung cancer. And that particular year that I became a pro catcher, we went 21 wins and no losses and won the city championship undefeated the year my grandpa died. The following year, what ended up happening is we finished runner up at a higher, different level. So as far as I'm concerned, my dad knew, because here's what ended up happening. Okay. I got the job. I said, Dad, you know what? I really got this here. I'm not giving this job up. I like it. And you put but you know what's really he likes about it. So what ended up happening was one catcher quit. The other one, my dad found a place for him in the lineup. And my dad says, I hate to tell you this, he's pretty good and I can't put him anywhere else. And because I chased down every foul ball and ran into fences, whatever. And my 60-year-old battered bull, maybe University of South Florida, by the way, in case you wonder what the bull is anyways. But my dad to me was unbelievable. And to this day, he has a lot of people on Facebook that go out there and call him coach. But again, now I have to tell you a funny story. Being a catcher, okay, at that time, my dad owned a sporting goods store. So, trying to really talk about it in a lighthearted manner, considering the taxing physical nature of the position, I had no problem getting reinforcement type of equipment in places where the sun doesn't shine. And he had no problem bringing them back home because he kind of knew I need them. So now, since Mark Littell many years ago, started a thing called the Nutty Buddy, which is, and he was on my show many times and helped me create No Limits, former Royals and Cardinals pitcher. He had a cup which is so strong that I could have used it back then, but Mark Littell was kind of doing something else like pitching. But the reality is this, okay? Joel, what you talk about is, in fact, the year that I went runner-up, my dad took me out to a local ball field and threw probably 150 pitches at me, and I ended up getting a single during that game because I was not a good hitter. I could always bunt, sacrifice myself a little bit with a bunt, move people over, draw walks. But you talk about getting it right. My father got it right. He found a strength that I had and never yelled. I mean, he just did what he had to do. And so I'll figure out one way or the other. And when I stumbled into that catcher's position, I wasn't giving it back. And he would, and he said, you don't have to. And that's that story, But when I put this program in perspective and I draw everything from Candy's incredible questions and Joel, obviously your overview of the subject during that time that you and Candy were talking, I've got 4 or 5 episodes playing in my mind about what we're going to do aside from Chalane, but we'll space them out as time goes on. But go ahead. I had to get that story in and, and I was going to do it. All right, Candy, go ahead and take over again because I know you have some more great questions. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I have a lot more questions for this episode, though. I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of different things. We touched on the documentary. We touched on, the coaching and everything like that. I guess, Joel, what would be the one thing you want people to leave this show knowing?
I want them to know that it can be done and it can be done right. And it doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive. And I don't mean that in the, cliche way. I mean in the where you develop, you grow, just like Scott just told us the story. Like how many coaches would have cut Scott if it hadn't been the right one? Yeah, it was your dad, but your dad could have been the kind of person that said, you know what, Scott, go play football, right? You could have had that kind of dad. You didn't. But that's the point. You have to find the right person that will actually care about your child. They will actually help that child develop and grow and find whatever the fit is. And that's where we need to really, really, really focus on. It's like, let's listen to our children. Let's find out what they want. And then let's try to give that to them, not what we think they want, but what they want. And that's why, like I said, the whole point of the movie is, and of the nonprofit, is that it's like to listen to our child. The focus should be on our child, not on us.
Yeah, I'll say this. I played hockey 1 year. I played basketball 1 year, well, with my dad. But baseball to me is a sport where it's a thinking man's sport. And when I treat life like a chess match. I don't know about you, Joel, but that's how I treat it. Well, being able to think so many steps ahead. And I had an opportunity many years ago to talk to Larry Bird and ask him a couple of questions. But even with my dad, even though my athletic career was limited to 7 years, doing different sports, the biggest opportunity I got was when he owned that sporting goods store. He had a manager that used to appear on as a guest for Sports Talk in Detroit. And that manager got me in there. And I met my colleague, George Eichhorn, who you saw comment. And even though I never really became a professional athlete or of any kind, but because of my dad's sporting goods store, and I got to meet George, and I've been in the broadcasting business for 43 years in sports media. So, I get to tell stories, I get to do interviews, I get to write stories, so whether you're participating in sports or you're not athletically gifted enough, there's always an opportunity to be a part of sports, even if it doesn't mean between the lines, but outside the lines. So I just want to get that point out there. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's good. I know this show's a little bit longer, but it's great. It really is. I know other episodes will be more specialized, is what they will be. But this is a good opportunity, Joel. Whether, even though Chalane wasn't on it, I'm sure she'll definitely draw ideas from what we're going to be working on later on, hopefully when she listens to the show. But this is a good overview of what we have in store with you, Joel. Obviously, you're where our children play, because there's going to be a lot of depths and elements that we have planning out future broadcasts. So, anything else you want to add, Candy?
No. I've enjoyed talking to Joel and learning more about what we can do for our kids, but also what we can do as adults for adults as well.
Any final thoughts, Joel?
Let's just keep listening to our kids. Let's do it for them.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this concludes this edition of No Limits. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed not only creating it, producing it, and talking it. And we look forward to bringing Joel and a lot of his other folks on time and time again. And this is a lot of fun. And I think the one thing that we try to do at South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network, and not only talk about the regular sports or non-sports related things, but when I come up with an idea where I'm throwing a Hail Mary, and as in the eyes of Brett Favre, I'm a gunslinger. I make no doubt about it. And this is what makes this industry so fun, is you can make anything out of what you want to make out of it. And anybody can talk about the basics. But when you find yourself out there being able to think above and beyond yourself and go no limits, then I think that's what tests not only the personality that you have, but whether you're a journalist, whether you're a fan, no limits is what life is all about. And I think that in my mind, okay, the sky's the limit for everybody. You just have to identify a lot of things. So we hope you've enjoyed spending your Saturday with us as much as we've enjoyed doing it. Candy, why don't you go ahead and once again go through the opportunity for people to identify us. Thank you.
So in the lower right corner, you're going to see a red subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. I don't know why you aren't. You need to be. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. You can share these broadcasts with, any of your friends, anybody you think that would enjoy them. We have an audio version is always available on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to be a contributor to South Florida Tribune, or if you want to be on one of our broadcasts, contact us either at Scott at 954-304-4941 or at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. We have also a website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where you can find all of the broadcasts as well as a plethora of information. We have writers, we have different media partners that contribute to our website. We would love for you to come see us. I think that's pretty much, Scott's got Twitter at Tribune South. I forgot about that. Facebook, Scott, South Florida Tribune. I think that's pretty much our laundry list of everything.
Well, there you go. You got it from Candy. So meanwhile, Joel, I know we'll be talking probably later on today or whatever after the show. But meanwhile, I want to thank once again everybody for joining us on this edition of No Limits. Enjoy March Madness.
Joel, how can we get a hold of you, or how can we, your website, or learn more about you?
Yes, our website is whereourchildrenplay.org. I'm on social media at DOC Youth Sports, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I think I said them all. So, always forget one of those. So yeah, just follow us. You can also email me at Joel, Joel, at whereourchildrenplay.org. And yeah, I think I mentioned everyone.
Perfect.
So there you have it. Now you know how to get a hold of Joel. Everybody knows how to get a hold of us by now. If you don't, go to www.southfloridatribune.com and you'll have it all. And Candy is the one who has created the website, and she feeds it every day from a broadcasting standpoint, content, etc. So on that note, thank you very much for joining us on today's edition of No Limits. I hope you enjoyed March Madness tonight. We got off to a great start with you, Joel, and looking forward to doing a lot more projects with you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Can't wait.
Good afternoon, everybody.